40 contenders. 7 rounds. The road to the Coke Series ends here.
Good evening, race fans, and welcome to Podium Esports coverage of the 6th and penultimate race of the 2021 eNASCAR Contender iRacing Series. Live tonight from the virtual Darlington Raceway in Darlington, South Carolina. Here's Blake, the voice of Podium Esports, alongside Josh Lee, Devin Henry, Ryan Bowers, always our producer for the evening, with cameras provided by Dougie Beard. As we get set to see who can tame the track too tough to tame. And Josh Lee, this is arguably the hardest oval to drive in all of eNASCAR. This is arguably the toughest driver's test that we're going to see on the Contender Series schedule. But at the end of the night, there's a decent chance we're going to have some names unofficially locked in to next year's Coke Series.
It's not going to be easy to get to that point, James. Like you mentioned, this is a very, very difficult track to get around. Turns 1 and 2, completely different than turns 3 and 4, where normally we'll have 3 or 4 lanes. You only have about 2 lanes of running in each of those corners. And oh, by the way, by the end of about 6 laps, you're already going to start to feel a massive effect on the tires. So this track just throws so many challenges at these drivers, and it's no surprise that when all 38 of these drivers tonight go dancing with the lady in black, only one of them is going to come out on top.
You're also probably going to see a lot of gaps develop. That's one thing that we know about this Class B stock car used in the NASCAR Xfinity Series in real life, Devin, is that with the high horsepower, low downforce combo that we use, we're going to see these drivers spread out around Darlington.
And I'm not going to try to put lipstick on a pig here. Throughout this season, we've seen a lot of single file, single lane racing at numerous different tracks. And when you come to Darlington, this doesn't necessarily change because of just how thin that track is. Obviously, Darlington has its own title given to it by how difficult it is to race. But if you think guys like Colin Keister, Donovan Strauss, Blake Reynolds, Parker Renslau, they haven't been starting P1, P2, P3. They have still had to pass cars. You still have to find a way to get around drivers. And what you're saying right there, James, that's exactly it. Once those gaps begin to form, and you have to begin to adapt to your race car and the racetrack as it changes throughout the day, passes are going to be made here, and you have to find a way during those really thin corner exits to make the moves, get the points, and go to Texas with a chance to be a Pro Series driver next year.
Not much left on the calendar. Darlington tonight, Texas next week, and we'll have the 20 finalists that will advance into the 2022 Coke Series. Here's a look at the point standings entering this evening from the iRacing data and the website. Colin Keister ahead by 18 over Donovan Strauss, and you look a little bit further back. The key number to remember tonight is 41 points. By our math, unofficially, if a driver leaves Darlington 41 points ahead of that cutoff line in 20th place, they will be racing in the Coke Series no matter what happens at Texas next week. Reasonably, there are some drivers that are going to have a shot at that. Now, here's a look at the back half of the point standings, and these are all drivers 84 points off the lead. That's not with respect to the cutoff line, so important to make sure we make that clarification. So, Blade Witt, Liam Brotherton, Jordy Lopez, Blake McCandless, all right there in the thick of it. We'll be racing likely until the final lap at Texas, Josh.
And remember, keep in mind that still have drop weeks that are waiting to be factored into these points. So that's got to be in the back of a lot of these drivers' minds as we go up atop the Darlington Raceway. They still got to be thinking about that one drop result that is going to be taken out of those points.
Devin Henry, this is a fun little racetrack, egg-shaped racetrack with its own history, own unique challenges and twists and turns.
Yeah, opened back in 1950, and this first race here that was sanctioned by NASCAR in the NASCAR Cup Series that ran here, they had over 85 entries in that race at this 1.36 mile track. I can't even imagine 87 cars on track. And as we said, this track in and of itself gives itself its name, the Lady in Black. Only 140 laps tonight, just under 200 miles. Remember, if we do see green flag pit stops, that is a very low 45-mile-an-hour stretch that you have to go down. And yeah, our fuel window is only 64 to 68 laps. What will you do with that in 5 tire sets? Everyone is very happy to see that many sets on pit road tonight when you come to Darlington.
They will need a lot of those tires because this place eats them up. The sand and the sand hills, the PD region that slide through this area makes this a very abrasive surface. Here's your starting grid for tonight. Dylan Alt will pick up right where he left off. He won it over last week. He starts on the pole with a 28.902 second lap alongside Ashton Crowder. Blaine Witt and Cody Bias will roll off from 3rd and 4th. 5th on the grid is Brian LaPrade, and Bobby Dale Earnhardt's Legacy Esports Caden Honeycutt rolls off from P6.
Colin Bowden sits to the inside of row 4. Liam Brotherton is there alongside. Parker Retzlaff, Kyle Peddle going to round out the top 10 on the starting grid. Brandon McKissick, Taylor Hurst going to round out the top 12 spots.
Starting off in that 7th row, Jake Nichols is alongside Santiago Tierez. Gierburn and Nicholas Skelton make up the 8th row. Malik Ray and Anthony Burrows make up the first 18 spots.
Donovan Strauss and Ryan Doucette complete the top 3 on the grid. Alan Bowes rolls off from 21st alongside Garrett Lowe. Michael Cosi Jr. and Derek Bordeaux start 23rd and 24th.
Colin Keister, there is your current points leader to the inside of row 13. Femi Olot to his outside. Jordy Lopez Jr., Blake Reynolds going to share that 14th row. Casey Tucker, Brian Mercurio rounding out the top 30.
31st goes to Derek Justice alongside Daniel Eberhardt. P33 is Seth the Merchant. Justin Bolton beside him. The first driver to not take time tonight, Zach Nichols, Blake McCandless, rounding out your 36-car field. Bottom 3 cars, no time here at Darlington.
Lots of work for them to do and some names you need to be aware of. Here's a look at the weather coming into tonight's race at Darlington. In sim, the air temp is 75 degrees Fahrenheit. The track temp 82 degrees Fahrenheit. Winds headed to the west at 2 miles an hour. But partly cloudy skies. The in sim time is December 18th, 2021, right around 1 p.m. local time in sim. So might be weird, but will be warmer than usual. We're still in South Carolina after all. For more from Pit Road, before we go green flag racing, let's chat with Justin Prince.
Yes, indeed. Thank you very much, James. And you may have just noticed a moment ago some trouble just off the start, trying to get things rolling for Brian LaPrade. He had an issue trying to get the car on and getting himself into gear. It was stuck in neutral for a good few seconds before getting rolling. Other than that, he looks to be okay. But one of the main talking points by drivers tonight has been, how will the strategy fare out? Because it is divided amongst the field how the fuel plays could go. Some think it could be a 2-stopper based on the tire fall off in the fuel burn. Others think they can save and make it a 1-stop and save time via that regard. It'll be interesting how that goes tonight, James.
Glad you're with us here, whether or not it's Podium 2 Twitch channel or iRacing's Twitch, Facebook, and YouTube pages. We are live for the next to last race of the 2021 eNASCAR Contender iRacing Series. Green flag is out from Darlington. Dylan Alt already out by almost a half second ahead of Ashton Crowder, who has had, quite frankly, no luck in this Contender Series. He is just about mathematically already guaranteed to need to come back through the qualifying series in 2022, but I don't think he'd mind a good run if he can string one together tonight. And traditionally, he's had fast cars, both in the Coke Series and in this Contender Series at Darlington. Josh?
Yeah, like you mentioned, absolutely no luck for the 98 team of Ashton Crowder, but a good qualifying effort to qualify P2. And even though Dylan Altz, who is on a bit of a roll after winning the fake 500 just a couple of days ago, pulls away at the front, Crowder's going to have to worry about Blade Witt behind, who is another one of those drivers that is just looking for a little bit of consistency. 21st coming into tonight for that 7 machine.
It's tight for Blade Witt. Not the case, though, for Caden Honeycutt, who has largely been the model of consistency. He did not have a good run at Dover, but every other race, he's been right there in the thick of the top 5, top 10. So Dover stands as his jump, and beyond that, when you're averaging somewhere in the ballpark of maybe, call it 29, 30 points a race, that will pretty easily get you into the Coke Series if you can keep that up.
Exactly, and Caden Honeycutt, and just the consistency there allows him to either race more conservative tonight or even more aggressive. You talked about at the start of the show how 42 points, that's the magic number that you're kind of looking for right now that might just lock you in regardless of if you start next week at Texas or not. Right now he comes in 45 above the cut line, so quite frankly you're looking for a top 20, which he's basically done or by far exceeded every single race thus far. He just knows he's got to keep riding that momentum, but he's got a few guys out in front of him who really want to win.
Is Briar LaPrade, who rides in the 5th spot out of Manchester, Tennessee, just ahead of a decent pack here. Cody Bias, Parker Retzlaff battling. You can see that now off the back deck lid of LaPrade's Ford Mustang as those two continue to go to work. That's 6th, 7th, and they also lead Liam Brotherton, Colin Bowden, Brandon McKissick, and Jake Nichols in that pack as well.
And James, we're already starting to hear it, and a little bit of a prediction from the Chris Shearburn guys that they believe 10 drivers are clutching right now around this track to try and save fuel. The way the fuel window was 64 to 68 laps, you need to save about 2 laps to make it to that 70 lap mark, which then you can pit halfway through this race and make it a 1-stop. But that is not factoring in that we might see cautions. That is also not factoring in the tire wear. Yes, it is a little bit cooler than I think a lot of these drivers were expecting. I believe we started the race at about 74 degrees on the track temp, and right now hovering around 75 degree air temp, 84 degrees on the track. So we could see a little bit of strategy come into play with the 1-stop, but I definitely still think, James, that a 2-stop strategy is going to be what a lot of these drivers end up doing and want to do, because we know how strong the tire wear is around Darlington. I don't think trying to stretch the tires for 70 laps is going to do any of these drivers any good.
And the general idea here with this pit strategy, Devin Henry, if you're up at the front, you've got the license to try and use that 2-stop strategy a little bit more. You don't necessarily have to gain anything off of pit strategy if you need to. But we may see drivers in the middle of the pack who don't have the track position go for a 1-stop strategy and try and save a little bit more. So you would expect folks like Dylan All to come in somewhere in the ballpark of, call it what, lap 45-ish? Maybe a little bit earlier than that. I'll cross-check the map. But some of these drivers a little bit further back, like Donovan Strauss, we may see try and 1-stop this right on lap 7.
Exactly, but when you hop into this cockpit, every single team already has a strategy ready to go, and sometimes it doesn't even matter where you qualify either. On board here with Daniel Eberhardt, just listen, those tires squeal for dear life in the middle of these abrasive corners. You know that your tires are going to fly off. You know that the fuel's going to guzzle down to almost nothing. When you hop into the car, there's 2 mindsets going on. One, I have the best tires I have right now, and I'm going to go. Get what you can now, or I want to have the best tire later on. I'm going to let guys by, save up that right front tire, even the right rear, and then go back and pounce on these guys later. So that's in part what also creates these wide gaps is 2 different groups of people right now. The conservative guys and the guys going, I'm going to pounce on some dudes. I'm going to get myself some spots right now. It all depends on where you are on track as well. In the middle right now with Burrows coasting out to the inside. This isn't always the most fun spot to be on track at Darlington.
Not a great spot here for Anthony Burrows, right in the middle of a big pack of people fighting for position, and a lot of drivers who are sort of around that bubble, as it were. You've got Michael Cozy Jr., who needs to fight his way up. Cody Bias, who's in a better place than most. Colin Keister there, Kyle Bettel. But Alan Bowes needs some points. Malik Ray needs some points. Nicholas Shelton could use a few points as well. So all the hard racing drivers who need to remember because they need the points.
And you can take a look when we just went back to Keister and Cozy basically cutting their way through the field. Insane the speed they've got as they try and work their way through the midfield. And we go on board now with Michael Cozy Jr. You can see started in P23, now sits up in P15. And we can take a look inside of his sim rig. Take a look at how much work he is putting in to that Fanatec wheel, trying his best to wheel that Logitech G Altus Esports machine around the Darlington Raceway. And who's he working himself by? Oh, how about Donovan Strauss, who has had an insanely dominant season. 2 wins, Auto Club in Nashville. Worst finish is not outside of the top 10. Right now, he sits P15. Willing to bet that number 51 team is wondering exactly what's going on in that race car and if we're going to see them back up towards the front in the latter half of this race.
But again, it's not a desperation mode race for Donovan Strauss. He certainly would like to run better, but he doesn't need to run better the same way that Michael Cozy Jr. needs to run better coming into tonight, unofficially 18 points out of the top 20. So Cozy needs the good run, but can dig and dig and dig. Strauss definitely not in the same spot as you get a good look up at Anthony Oro's calling just ahead of him.
Exactly, and for Donovan Strauss coming into this race second in points with 66 points, good to the cut line, you know that this camp and Space Station Gaming has a plan of what they need to do to probably grab another top 15, top 10. Maybe they'll fly up and win again, who knows, but when you have that plan set, I feel like Darlington, even though it's so difficult, it's easier to have that initial plan. Obviously, everything can go flying into the wall like a couple of cars already have tonight, but nonetheless, once you set that plan in place, the bet is already made. So while it's easy to make a plan for Darlington sometimes, depending on how you feel like your car needs to go, there's other guys out there like Alan Bowes. He's been stuck in 21st like the entire race, around 20th-ish. Then you have other guys right behind him is Casey Tucker. He started this race in 4th. He's 22nd. There's guys like Colin Keister. Started 25th. He's in 15th. You see these plans really start to mix and merge, but once these tires really, and I mean really, begin to wear off, give it like maybe another 5-10 laps, then you're going to see guys really start to mix and match and battle against one another because you're going to have those two strategies beginning to clash.
Drivers that have been making charges.
And you can see right in front of Donovan Strauss, I believe that was Daniel Eberhardt, who just made a small tap to the wall there. He did damage to the side of that number 90 machine. We'll see what happens to Daniel Eberhardt, but going on board with Donovan Strauss, he just let a handful of cars go by. Now he's going to have Alan Bowes and Casey Tucker on his back bumper, and Bowes is going to look to the inside, wondering if this is strategy from the 51 or if he has genuine problems with that race car and is just letting drivers go. There goes Casey Tucker and Alan Bowes right on by. Now Strauss is going to have Brian Mercurio to deal with on his back bumper as we put about 19 laps behind us, and there goes Strauss letting Brian Mercurio by. Very interesting from the most dominant car we've had all season in the 51. Either they're having some monumental issues with that car, James, or Donovan Strauss is playing the long game on the strategy, trying to save both tires and fuel.
I was going to bring up Daniel Eberhardt as someone who had been making a charge, and then no sooner did he start making the charge than he put himself in the fence, and that to me suggests that we have a driver who understood his position in the point standings and certainly well off the cutoff and was racing hard and was racing well. He was making his way up through the field, but Devin, if ever there is a place where you've got a track that will absolutely come out and bite you if you try and race too hard for too long and give 110% for too extended in a period of time, Darlington might be tops amongst the list, and I think that's exactly what's happened to Eberhardt.
And you see how much damage is already on that right front for Eberhardt off what is really not that bad of a hit. I mean, any hit at the wall here to grab a black stripe at Darlington really sucks, but boy, the damage all the way across the right side for Daniel Eberhardt. This is maybe not going to affect the aero, but it's going to affect how the cars feel. Obviously, all these teams spend hours meticulously setting up whatever they can in the car to make it the best possible, and once you get that damage, it really offsets the feeling of the car and how you need to drive it. So someone who's already 49 points below the cut line, this is the last thing that you wanted. And yes, in the Contender Series, there are no fast repairs, just in case you were wondering.
this is definitely do or die time for Eberhard. Here's Ashton Crowder, who at this point it largely is pride. 70 points out coming into this evening. He needs to find a way to be within 40 exiting the night, or his chances of making the Coke Series next year will be entirely extinguished. Mathematically, still possible. Realistically, improbable. So, in some sense, Josh, I'd say the pressure's off of him, because this is just about him putting together a good run and showing that, A, he can still wheel it, and B, that when he goes to the qualifying series, most likely next season, that he'll have the opportunity to race his way straight back into the Coke Series for 2023.
It seems like at this point that Crowder's going to need to put a bit more focus on the qualifying series next year, because even if he finishes second place where he is now, he's going to need a lot of drivers in front of him to finish basically close to last place. Like you mentioned, it's possible mathematically that Crowder can get into the top 20 in 2 rounds. Probable is a completely different story, and right now this seems just like crisis management for the 98 of Ashton Crowder. He's having the run that he really needed back at round number 2 of Homestead. It's coming too many rounds too late, and all that string of bad luck and those strings of last place finishes are what's going to be detrimental to that 98 machine as we go on board with Brian LaPrade. So calm inside of his sim rig as he races on, goes up to the wall through turns 3 and 4, back to the front straightaway in that Ford Mustang, up 1 spot from where he began the night, trying to chase down Caden Honeycutt in the 10, who sits in front of him. He's now we look on board with Colin Bowden.
Bowden, who enters tonight officially 9 points to the good of the cutoff, and running nicely here in the top 10. Good run for him, exactly what I know he wants. He's got that sort of chin-up style, a little bit of a face right up on the wheel, sort of Brian Schoenberg-esque style for Colin Bowden, but he's just hanging around. Leading this group just ahead of him as you get a good look a little bit further back at some of the other drivers in this field. Daniel Eberhard, Brian Mercurio, Johnny Lopez Jr. in the mix as well.
And already it feels like this has already been such a long run, as now Bose goes around Daniel Eberhard to the inside here, still just trying to deal with whatever damage control that he can with the literal damage for Eberhard. We still got 153 virtual miles to go. This becomes such a tolling race with the close quarter racing, the adaptability that you have to have in the race car to get back up front and pass cars. Is now Eberhard's just letting cars by, knowing that he does not have the speed with all that damage. Look how Justice looks kind of tense. I don't know if I could race like that. He looks a little tense there. That's going to be a very long 150 miles still to go if you are tense. I don't think he is. He just looks tense, but nonetheless, man, goodness gracious. It already feels like this is such a long race, and in the cockpit, it's really mentally tolling. It truly is to really pay attention at that top level for so long, and this race is so long, so tight. As you see T-Rex squeeze it under the 24, looking to pick up a spot here off of turn number 4 on Jake Nichols for 4.
For more from pit road, let's go to Justin Prince. Justin.
Keep in mind, with a lot of these drivers, strategy has been the main discussion point just about across all the radios. It is currently estimated about nearly half the field is trying to save fuel to make it towards the halfway point of the race, trying to clutch from the very beginning for some of the drivers. Others, they've been trying to keep their options open, while some of the crew chiefs, they've been mentioning, especially in some of the top 5s camps, that they want to keep on pushing and want to keep going full out throughout this entire run. Now, keep in mind, some of the drivers towards the front may have noticed some pace drop off a little bit. Boyd Witt started getting into that save mode as well. He's also, though, having some overheating problems for the number 7. They're right now at the very edge when it comes to the water temps, and are trying to keep those temperatures cool before they get towards their stops. Right at the very tip of staying within the red right now, James. Some of these drivers in terms of those temps, others, they're trying hard for the strategy game.
So not only is fuel mileage an issue, but air temperature, water temperature, oil temperature, all these things factoring in. And drivers traditionally do run on the edge of what you can get away with as far as tape goes, Josh, just because the more tape you add, the more downforce you get, and the faster your car goes, but of course you also run the risk of overheating the engine as well. So it's always a fine balance that you have to play at every track that we go to, not just Darlington.
And it's specifically tough for Blade Witt in the situation that he's in because it has to deal with the amount of tape on the grill. If you're at a restrictor plate track like Daytona or Talladega, as we see Justin Bolton going into turn 3, he popped the clutch in. For Blade Witt, it's on the grill with the amount of tape. You can only change that when you're in the pit lane. You cannot change that from inside the car. If you're heating from running around other cars, you try and get some clean air. You either drop back or run forward. If it's tape on the grill, you're basically a sitting duck just trying to go into crisis management and make sure that that engine isn't going to blow up before you go onto pit road. So he really just cannot do anything except get on the gas a little bit later, lift a little bit more going into each of these corners just to make sure he's not using that engine when he doesn't need to.
We look at Liam Brotherton, fresh off of his best run of the campaign last week at Dover, came home third. He's currently in 7th and just trying to hang out behind Blade Witt there, who has a pretty big gap to Parker Retzlaff. It's almost 3.5, closing up on 4 seconds now between Witt and Retzlaff. So Brotherton, I think, just trying to scamper away with Witt from the group behind. That includes Colin Keister, Alan Bowden, Brandon McKissick, Santiago Tires, and Jake Nichols and Nicholas Shelton, too.
And we've seen this more than once out of Colin Keister so far this year, looking off the rear bumper of the North Force Racing number 8 Chevy Camaro. Man, how about this? From 25th to 8th. That took him 35 laps to do that. And then everyone else inside the top 10, they all started either inside the top 10 or Brandon McKissick was in 11th. So thus far, I gotta say, the guy who has had arguably the most impressive runs all Contender season long, he's doing it again right now, guys, and I'd be concerned if I'm anyone else going, man, what does that 8 car have in it that no one else seems to have right now?
He's motoring. There's absolutely no other way to put it. No question. The fastest man on the racetrack, and he's just been slicing through the competition. And now I wonder if Liam Brotherton's gotten the memo and has decided he needs to make a move around Blade Witt. That's exactly what he'll do. Gets to the inside, shovels to the outside as Keister now right on the bumper of Witt. Witt's not even going to put up a fight. He'll let him go. So now move Keister up into the 7th position, trying to chase down Brotherton for 6th.
What a race Colin Keister is having right now. I mean, there's a reason he is at the top of the point standings right now. Very, very consistent season from the 8. We saw his win at Homestead. And now, of course, being at the top of the points without that drop week factored in, he is having an amazing run so far here at Darlington. He's got Liam Brotherton to deal with now in the number 19 as he continues to chase him down through 1 and 2 they go. He needs to remember as they go through this run, yes, he's up 18 spots, yes, he has a great car, needs to continue to conserve those tires, and if he wants to make a 1-stop, also conserve that fuel. As we look on board with Brian LaPrade, he's going to be one of the drivers Colin Keister is going to have to deal with soon as Keister gets by Liam Brotherton behind. He's going to have a Retzlaff, LaPrade, Honeycutt, Crowder, and Olds in front of him up to the front of the field.
I'll be really curious to see what Keister can do over the course of the next 5 to 10 laps, because now he's going to have clear racetrack. It's 4 seconds up to Parker Retzlaff, who's halfway down the back straightaway as Keister exits, and now rather almost a full straightaway as I look at it again down the back between Retzlaff and Keister. But more importantly, Keister's going to have clean racetrack, so we're going to be able to see just what kind of lap times he can set compared to Retzlaff, but more importantly, I think compared to the leaders. And last time he was a solid 0.2 faster, now 0.3 up on the rest of the field of the fastest lap in the entire race. Last time by at a 31.490. So Colin Keister absolutely reeling in the top 5.
And here to the analytics that always really intrigue me every time we come to a track like Darlington. You take the leader, Dylan Alt, who has been on a blistering pace. His best lap tonight is a 29.848. You look at his last lap just across the line, nearly 2 full seconds slower, 31.688. So make that 1.8 second difference between his fastest lap and now we are completing lap number 40. You go to Colin Keister, his fastest lap is more than 0.3 slower than Dylan Alt, a 30.1. But like you're just talking about, James, he's consistently running a couple tenths faster than everybody else in front of him, if not 3, maybe 4 sometimes. So that's where your tire conservation comes from. But at the same time, Hasn't Keister been going through traffic, and yet somehow he still has the tire to outrun the guys in front of him currently, but can he continue to reel them in and make those passes made? And also, I do want to look at the weather real quick because it is 75 degrees ambient temperature right now. Track temp has eclipsed 88 degrees right now, and it's only going to get warmer, guys, and as these tires wear out, the track heats up. You know what that means. We're going to get slipping and sliding here in a little bit.
You would think. And your point about Colin Keister, I think, is equally as valid. The question is whether or not he's burned up his stuff going through the field or whether or not he still has managed to save something, even with all those passes, which would underscore just how impressive his opening 40-plus laps of this race have been. Here's a look at Caden Honeycutt, Ashton Crowder, and a little bit of Briar LaPrade. This is the battle for second, third, and fourth. Also note that we are approaching lap 45, and if you are thinking about two-stopping this race, we should likely see some folks down pit road within the next handful of laps.
If they're going to do that two-stop strategy, yes. Will we see anybody go for a one-stop? We usually have, I believe since round number 1, at least in every race, we've had 2 or 3 drivers go for alternate strategy. We've seen a couple drivers go for that oddball strategy, and I think we're going to see a couple drivers go for a bit of an oddball strategy as we stay on the battle for the lead. More so a battle for third place right now between Crowder, Honeycutt, and LaPrade as they run very close together. Dylan Alt still pulling away at the front. Honeycutt in between the 98 and the 35. He went for a move in turns 3 and 4. Wasn't able to do it. It takes a lot to get these cars slowed down for turns 3 and 4, especially on worn tires. And if we haven't talked about tires enough tonight, I'll add a little bit of fuel to the fire as here comes Briar LaPrade, already losing about 2 seconds for most of the field on tire wear. Here comes Briar LaPrade.
Let's go down to Justin Prince, first of our leaders on pit road.
And so far, Briar LaPrade has been getting the message from Anthony Alfredo all throughout this run. Keep the car smooth, keep being patient, and wait for some of the battles to fare out. Keep in mind, we've seen some of that battling coming up with second and third prior to his stop. Pride fairly happy when it comes to that car. Caden Honeycutt, meanwhile, he's electing to come on down. His crew chief tonight, Vicente Salas, adamant that his driver go on this two-stop call. Right now, they are happy when it comes to their pace as well. Currently, very quiet on the radio has been Caden Honeycutt in that regard. Santiago Gutierrez also ducking on down. He's been amongst the drivers trying to push hard from the mid-pack. Keep in mind, when it comes to him tonight, needing a lot of valuable points to put himself in the conversation with the drop factored in inside the top 20 or so. More drivers expected to come down this time by. Amongst those, Michael Cozy Jr. calling, Brandon McKissick, and several others. Daniel Eberhardt as well has just ducked on in. He's had some struggles after hitting the wall a couple times. He's off and away. Right now, several crew chief adjustments and changes when it comes to that grouping in recent weeks. But more cars are coming in. Brett Slap very quiet on the radio as well tonight, keeping himself very cautious on his run, while others like Michael Cozy Jr., they haven't said a single word since the drop of the green flag in their respective cars, other than for when to time things up for the strategies. In our words, many of the drivers completely dialed in and focused on trying to conquer this racetrack as several more come on in this time.
Biggest thing I saw over the last few laps, Justin Prince, Colin Keister missed pit road that first time and did not find his way down to the entrance and towards his pit box. He had to go another lap around the racetrack and cost himself a valuable amount of time. So we'll see where that puts him in the cycle of things once everybody else comes down pit road that's going to go for this two-stop strategy. But Colin Keister misses his box and loses valuable time on the racetrack on this first cycle of green flag pit stops. Looks like most of the folks that have come down, though, are done and dusted. I don't know if we're going to see too many more, because you start to hit a point here after 3 or 4 laps, Josh, where if you don't make the decision to come down pit road, then you're just bleeding time, and you're better served waiting and trying to make the one-stop strategy work.
I think we might see a couple of the drivers that are closer to the midfield try and go for that one-stop strategy. I'm not in the boat of thinking Alt, Witt, Brotherton are really going to go for a one-stop strategy. They might if they think it's feasible. You got to remember, yes, we're not in the Coke Series, but a lot of these drivers have people and teams behind them at the level of the eNASCAR Coca-Cola iRacing Series. So they probably know a lot of things that we don't. And for a lot of the drivers up front, maybe they're looking at a one-stop strategy as the better strategy to use. But Briar LaPrade, even though he went one lap down, is about a corner away from Dylan Alt. As Alt crosses the line now, LaPrade comes out of turn number 4. So he'll eventually reach him to grab his lap back. Just wondering if closer to the end of the race and closer to the end of this run that the one-stop strategy drivers are doing, will the tire wear be too much for the drivers that are only pitting once? And will the fresher tires of the drivers going for a two-stop be worth it for them as Honeycutt goes to the inside of Briar LaPrade? This is the battle for 22nd on the racetrack. They stay side by side off 4. Honeycutt almost makes contact with the 35, but LaPrade's going to hold on to it across the line.
This is not the battle for 22nd, I would argue, so much as it is the battle to be the first car amongst those running the two-stop strat. These are your two leaders of that pack of cars. LaPrade and Honeycutt are also clear of everybody else by about 5 seconds. It was not a good pit stop for Ashton Crowder, who bled a ton of time on his entry and exit off of pit road. So all eyes here on LaPrade and Honeycutt, and another set of eyes on Justin Bolton, running in the 18th position. He, Blake Reynolds, Derek Wardell, and everybody else here on the racetrack, and within the top 20 essentially, all going to be trying to clutch and coast and make sure they can make it to lap 70.
So 2 major points here, guys. First of all, just seeing some of these cars with fresh tires, we are seeing a 2 to 3 second difference right now between the guys who just hit pit road and the guys who are still on track since the green flag. And just seeing the car control from both parties is astounding. Second of all, to answer Josh's question, well, I guess not answer, not smart enough to actually answer it, but you take either a 3-stop or a 2-stop, right? If we were to go green all the way, as we have multiple times this year. I just jinxed it, by the way. But besides that point, when you look at how long it's taking drivers to go down pit road, this does not include slowdown time or get up to speed time on the apron. Drivers are taking about 47 to 48 seconds on pit road. Note, average time going around the track right now on older tires is about 32 seconds. So you're losing nearly a lap and a half going down pit road. You have to now, as a crew chief at least, understand what is going to be faster if we do go green the whole way. Having that extra 47 seconds on pit road where you're going 45 miles an hour, or staying in, getting fresh tire more often, and will that fresh tire make up that 47 seconds on pit road? More than likely another 30 seconds of slowdown get up time.
Thomas Shaw's currently riding in 14th. He's just behind Seth DeMerchant in the 57 for Logitech G Altus Esports. And again, everybody here running in a pack, just trying to save as much fuel as they can and not fight too much, because they know, A, they've got the pit stops to worry about in maybe 15 laps or so. B, they've got the end of the race to try and hit as well.
As we take another look at the LaPrade and Honeycutt battle, thinking now, as we are about 14 laps away from that point of the one-stop strategy coming into play, thinking a lot of the drivers who are still out on the racetrack are going to go for it, which I honestly was not expecting the two-stop strategy to be the oddball strategy that I was talking about for drivers to try. I was expecting the one-stop strategy to be the oddball, but with cooler track temperatures, it might be feasible, because looking at the lap times and how much they've lost, these drivers are way better at tire conservation than I will ever be on the iRacing service, losing about a second and a half throughout a lot of the drivers up front. Last time by for Dylan Alt, 31.796. Last time, or best time for Dylan Alt, 29.848. So they've lost about a second and a half, now going over the way of 2 seconds. That is not bad in the scope of Darlington. Losing 2 seconds because of tire wear is still no anywhere near good, but compared to normal numbers at Darlington, it's actually pretty good on the tire wear, with about 10 laps until we might see a lot of the drivers that were trying to make the one-stop strategy work make their way into the pit lane, and they really need to hit pit lane at lap 70 or 71, James, or else they will need to save even more fuel for the second run than they did on this first.
it's a very delicate balancing act that you're going to have to hit in order to make things work. Is right on board with Alan Bowes from Dead Zone Racing, looking just ahead at Derek Justice. This is 8th and 9th that you're watching on the racetrack, as we are 10 laps away from not only the halfway point, but the likely point in which we'll see the rest of the drivers, the top 23 who have yet to come down pit road for service, make their way in for 4 tires and fuel in what should be their only stop of the race. But it's still Dylan Alt who has led from the drop of the green flag. It's an even better performance up to this point, I'd say, Devin, than what we saw from him last week at Dover, where I wouldn't say he was the dominant car, but coming into tonight and the way this race has panned out so far, no one's been faster than Alt in his Chevy Camaro.
And I keep saying it's the Sacramento kid right now, which is only like 6:45 right now. I've always wondered if the time difference, time of day ever mess with sim racers about how well they do in a race or mindset, things like that. I'm sure it's really based on personality as well, but nonetheless, like you said, when you look at how good he was at Dover, maybe not the best car, but made it work, that's what you need here at Darlington sometimes. The best car isn't always going to win. You look at the fuel strategy. You look at Keister, who was probably the most consistent car on track, miss pit road. It comes down to execution when you have that planned strategy, and also just the strategy working out in general. As you see this train of fresh tires come by Dylan Alt, this is what you are going to see throughout the rest of this race since we have split strategy. There will never be a time again, unless we get a caution and everyone comes down pit road, where there's not going to be 2 types of cars. Fresh rubber rocket launchers and guys with the anchors out managing their tires and fuel. So this is always my favorite part about races like this, where you have 2 very specific different strategies. Watching these guys intermingle and not completely mess each other's race up.
Which is the goal, but as we've seen plenty of times before, this not just the Contender Series, but many other places, it is possible that difference in speed ends up throwing somebody off, and we end up with the yellow flag that changes the strategy of the race entirely. For more information on our race leader, let's go down to Justin Prince. Justin.
Yes, indeed. And speaking of the race leader, just got the confirmation a few laps ago from Garrett Mashburn, his crew chief for tonight, that they are committed to their strategy. They have committed to the one stop, and they will lie in their bed here. Asked how he was able to stretch out this fuel tank with the pace he had been running. He mentioned he was great at maintaining the pace, Dylan Alt specifically, while clutching into the corners. They feel it'll be still very close in terms of lap itself, but they are not concerned when it comes to that number. They've been having him report the fuel usage each and every lap. Similar situation for Blade Witt. Right now, the usage near identical, in fact, for the number 7 machine. It's been very calm since those temperature issues a little while ago. Also worth noting that amongst the drivers who also feel like they have a comfortable gap, that also includes Chris Shearburn. He's been told to back up as much as he can in terms of saving compared to those who went for the aggressive save early on this run. So the strategies, they're opening up. And also keep in mind, Caden Honeycutt also made clear in the in-sim radio to Briar LaPrade, he will ride on behind the 35 as they make their way for the traffic for the time being as well.
We look here at Chris Shearburn, who is in the top 5. It's one of his best runs of the Contender Series campaign. The problem is that he is still on the outside looking in, at least at this stage. 13 points unofficially off the cut line entering this evening. So, yes, the top 5 will certainly help his case, but the likelihood is that it will take a good run here and at Texas next week in order for him to have a shot. What's there from Derek Justice there, Devin Henry?
Yeah, that's not going to help either. So he's more than likely had himself a little bit of a Darlington stripe in that number 31 machine. So that's going to hinder you maybe a little bit, but the speed still seems to be there. It always kind of throws you off, though, once you hit that wall. It really throws you out of a rhythm. We've already talked about how it feels like this race has gone on forever, but we are actually just coming up to the halfway point in just a few more laps. That means that we still have over 75 virtual miles to go in this race. And falling out of your rhythm, you mentioned it earlier, James, with the faster cars going by you, it's not just contact, it's just the fact that that throws you off your rhythm and off your groove as well. And for somebody like anyone below the cut line, the Shearburns, the Nichols, the Boltons, the McKissicks, you need to be at your best 24/7, while guys like this, Donovan Strauss, who's been running so well this year, you know what? If they don't really care, they're just going to run and do what they can to go out and get one more win. this race is not as crucial, and specifically this run in particular, is not as crucial to other drivers who are going to try to take advantage of either some drivers being over-aggressive or over-conservative because they are below or near that cut line.
Right on the edge here of pit stops. We do owe you an iRacing midway race break once we hit lap 70, but we're going to hold for just a few laps just to see who decides to come in for service. And look at that. Right as I say something, Blade Witt is the first of the drivers on the one-stop strategy to make his way down to pit road as we see Dylan Alt here working lap 70 of 140. Will he come in right on the money? Yes, he will. So Alt will split this race down the middle perfectly and come in for service. And as he does that, we'll go back down to Justin Prince.
So more pit stops coming on in now for the one-stop drivers at the halfway mark. Dylan Alt doing so very tight on the margins. Keep in mind, some of his technical alliance mates did not have the same run. One lap earlier from Brian Mercurio, I should say, and Blade Witt. Those drivers completing their service now. Then Colin Bowden, he felt he was very close all throughout the run. He had been reporting several times that he would be good, then not good. Good, then not good. That's how tight the margins have been when it comes to their fuel mileage so far tonight. Also, as the rest of the drivers peel on in, Taylor Hurst with a very quiet night so far. He's now on in along with Chris Sherburne, who's also been very quiet on the radio from the drop of the green flag. So a few of the drivers are in, a couple, they've extended it already a couple laps further than lap 70 already.
Aiden Honeycutt and Brian LaPrade up to second and third with Ashton Crowder fourth. All of them on the two-stop strategy, but Liam Brotherton is your race leader as the two drivers on the two-stop get right around Dylan Alt. Wild how that works out, that they come out right together, 1, 2, 3, as Brotherton will now peel off the racetrack for his pit stop. Derek Justice is next in line. He now comes down to pit road, and Alan Bowes will be the next car in line on the one-stop strategy to stretch his fuel by another lap.
So this is going to get very, very interesting. So Bowes is still on the racetrack. He has not pitted. Neither has Cody Bias. Kyle Peddle is still on the racetrack. Malik Ray is still on the racetrack. Bolton, Reynolds, Bordeaux, McCandless. I'm wondering how long they are going to be on the racetrack. Maybe they're trying to stretch it far enough to where they'll have better tires than a couple of the drivers at the end of this race. Still seems like by each lap that goes by, they're just losing time on the racetrack to the other drivers. Even though Bowes sits in fourth, he is very quickly losing time to Colin Keister, who is now 2 seconds within that number 21 machine we're getting a look at now. I don't like this strategy, James. To put it boldly, I do not like the strategy of the one-stop right now where these drivers are continuing to stay out. Kyle Peddle is going to come in this time, but Bowes is still on the racetrack. Doucette, Bolton is still on the racetrack. Reynolds comes in, Bordeaux comes in, and McCandless comes in. So for the drivers that are just now coming in and are continuing to stay on the racetrack, I don't see this going well. Hopefully their crew chiefs know better than I do up here in the booth.
And I wonder whether or not you might just be sitting around and waiting for a yellow flag, as now here comes Alan Bowes in for service, and that leaves Ryan Doucette and Justin Bolton as the final two drivers out there on the one-stop strategy, yet to make their pit stops as Bowes comes in. Justin Prince, let's head back down to you one more time.
I want some of the drivers, including some of these competitors, peeling on in tonight for this one-stop strategy. Blake McCandless, it has been a rough one tonight. He chose not to qualify or the content, quote-unquote, he had said. Wanted to challenge himself, and originally, funnily enough, had said it was a 1 in a billion chance he would go for the one-stop. Guess what? It's been the 1 in a billion hit. He was not happy with how this race has fared out for him, especially with the strategy coming into play for some of these competitors. Also, Donovan Strauss completed his stop just moments ago. He also loosened his car up a little bit throughout that service. Alan Bowes just finished his pit stop service with 15-2 in the box. Very quiet from that respective camp as well. They've been very happy in that regard. But one thing to note as well, one driver did lose some time in the pit lane. A few seconds for Cody Bias in the 27. He has been told by his crew chief he can go full out now this run as a result of the saving.
Everybody has come down pit road at least once, and that now gives us the opportunity to bring you tonight's iRacing Midway Race Break. As always, is brought to you by our friends at iRacing, home to the world's leading online racing game. iRacing puts you in the driver's seat to experience today's newest form of competitive motorsport, virtual racing, all from your home PC. Race virtually in Australian supercars, IndyCar, IMSA, NASCAR, the world of outlaws, and more. Briar LaPrade and Caden Honeycutt, the top few drivers on the two-stop strategy, your leaders in first and second. Ashton Crowder rides in third. Colin Keister, even after missing his box, is in fourth. Nicholas Shelton running in the top five in fifth. Santiago Gutierrez up to sixth at this stage. Anthony Burrows currently holds seventh. Eighth belongs to Jake Nichols. Garrett Lowe is ninth. And rounding out the top 10, Josh Lee, is Michael Cozy Jr.
Teammate to Cozy, Jordy Lopez Jr. sits P11, Brandon McKissick sits in P12, Dylan Alt sits P13, Blade Witt just got by Daniel Eberhardt to take over P14, Colin Bowden sits in P16, Liam Brotherton just got by Chris Shearburn to go up into P17 on the racetrack, Brian Mercurio just made a move on a lap to Chris Shearburn in P19, Taylor Hurst rounds out the top 20.
Parker Renslap started in 9th. He's now back in 21st. Derek Justice in P22. Alan Bowes to the 23rd position. Seth the Merchant in 24th. Donovan Strauss 25th. Zach Nichols riding in 26th. Cody Bias started 4th. He's mired back in 27th. Malik Ray 28th. Kyle Peddle P29. Blake Reynolds rounds out the top 30.
Derek Bordeaux currently scored in 31st. Ryan Doucette in 32nd. Justin Bolton holds 33rd at the moment, and Casey Tucker is 34th. Blake McCandless and Femi Olot round out the 36-car field here at Darlington Raceway. And that concludes tonight's iRacing Midway Race Break. With over 170,000 drivers on the service and over 90 laser-scan traction cars to choose from, iRacing is your portal to the racing world. Get on track today at iRacing.com. The LaPrade and Honeycutt are front two on the racetrack ahead of Crowder and Keister. But again, all of those drivers, along with everyone in the top 12, plus Daniel Eberhardt, plus Parker Retzlaff, all going to have to come down pit road one more time. Everybody else, good to the end. Starting with Dylan Alt and Blade Witt, who were up at the front before the pit stops. They're now 13th and 14th, but they're the top two drivers in the field on the one-stop strategy. So everything for the most part, Josh Lee, within the strategies is as you were. The running order that we've seen throughout this race has held certain.
In a way, yes, it has, but of course, different faces closer to the top. Colin Keister, who had a monumental start to this race, climbed his way up through the field, sits in P4 right now. We'll see if he can hold on after more pit stops come into play, and for most of the drivers, I believe everybody here in the top 12 is on that two-stop strategy, with 38 laps on the stand for Brian LaPrade, 37 for Honeycutt, 35 for Crowder, and it's very similar going down into P12. Dylan Alt sits first of the drivers on the one stop with Blade Witt behind him. Daniel Eberhardt is on a two-stop strategy. He's in about of a one-stop strategy driver sandwich right now. And then you can go back a little bit further. Alan Bowes was one of the drivers to try and stretch it further. Cody Bias, Malik Ray, Kyle Peddle, Blake Reynolds, and more. Assuming all the drivers that stretch that fuel as far as they possibly could past at lap 70 are essentially thinking we'll have fresher tires at the end, plus we'll be able to not really have to save anything. We'll be within the fuel window going to the end, so we can go full out through this run, as we have a bit of a stack up right now surrounding Blake Reynolds. There's about 5 cars running all within a couple of inches of each other, spearheaded by Malik Ray. Dylan Alt's in the middle of this. Kyle Peddle is there as well. Blake Reynolds and Derek Bordeaux are all in this line. Here comes the 54, Kyle Peddle, down to the inside of Dylan Alt in the 40.
This is exactly what we talked about earlier, Devin Henry, when we looked at this group and we said, just with the way the two strategies play out, there are points in which they will literally converge on the racetrack, and you'll have drivers running at two different paces. They may end up running into each other, getting into it with each other, causing problems for one another. This is something these drivers in this pack, in particular right now, need to be very wary of.
Oh man, that was so tight. Blake Reynolds had to squeeze it 3 wide. Everyone trying to get around Brandon McKissick, who has just set the anchor out and is flying backwards into the hands of Dylan Alt momentarily. Boy, is that not one of the scariest things as a race car driver in this sim, just having everybody try to rip to the inside of you. But you look at where Dylan Alt is on track right now. He's right now sitting in the 12th position. He's been the dominant car of the night, but you see all those cars I mean, it's so frustrating. Even as a driver, knowing that they have fresher tires, you watch those black dots just get smaller and smaller and smaller as they go away. And you got to get over that and go, I'm not even racing these guys right now. That's not even my, okay, this car right here I want to pass. But no, those guys on that separate strategy, you're not even racing them. You have to find how you want to race them correctly, right? To make sure that you don't get caught up in a battle that, one, hinders your tires, two, hinders a lap, because who knows what 3/10s might mean later on in the race, right? So you have to have the mentality, who am I racing right now, and how do I get out of the way of guys who I'm not racing currently? He sits in 12th. Still plenty of moves to be made, though, including these down pit road, Honeycutt and Crowder.
I was about to say, Justin Prince, the two stop leaders are now in for service.
And there had been talk for the past few laps on trying to figure out what lap they wanted to go in, but the consensus, especially when it comes to the Honeycutt camp, was come before lap 90, have time to try and reel on in the one-stoppers. They are going to be likely close on fuel, though it's been indicated in terms of some of the adjustments. As well, Briar LaPrade has just completed his service, very quiet on the radio this run. He has been reporting, though, in the 35 that the car has been on the splitter for parts of the run. He is indicating, though, he feels if it's quicker, then he will ride with it. So that's some of the consensus among some of the drivers who have completed their service. Also completing service, Ashton Crowder off and away in a very quiet night, the quietest he's been in the car in the 98 this season.
Just look at the one lap gap here. There's LaPrade to Honeycutt. Remember, they were right on top of each other before they came down pit road. And LaPrade undercutting Hayden Honeycutt by one lap stretches the gap between those two drivers up to, I believe, about, call it 2 seconds. Big entry and exit off of pit road for Briar LaPrade on that second pit stop. Nice work for the Ledger Billiard Supply Ford Mustang.
And take a look at the closing rate as we ride on board into the inside of Cody Bias. Goes Caden Honeycutt in the number 10 machine. Back down into turns 3 and 4. So now they're done. 2 stops over and done for the 2-stop strategy guys. Now it's going to be a bit of a waiting game for the 1-stop strategy drivers to start to trickle their way in. McKissick comes into the pit lane, waiting on Keister, Shelton, Tires, Lowe, Nichols, and Cozy. That looks to be the end of the 2-stop strategy drivers. They're all within that top 7 right now. Hearing more calls for drivers pitting. It's not going to be anybody in the top 2, but it will be Santiago Tires, who comes in from P3. And it looks like the 6 of Garrett Lowe gets down to the inside as we ride on board with Dylan Alt as he rides right on by.
Dylan Alt carrying on here in P3 at the moment, but again, first to the one-stop drivers. That's the key. We're starting to see more of the drivers who came down on that 2-stop strategy in for service. Santiago Tires, Garrett Lowe, Michael Cozy Jr., all now in pit road for what should be their final pit stop. And the only 2 drivers left here are Nicholas Shelton and Colin Keister, both of whom are due for stops. Keister now making his way in for service, so it is Nicholas Shelton, and that is it. And then it becomes a game of, can anybody run down Dylan Alt and take the lead away from him for the closing stages of this race, or can he hang on for his second consecutive victory in the eNASCAR Contender iRacing series?
Interesting move by Shelton to be the last car to come down pit road, as maybe this is a move for him. Only 1 point above the cut line coming into tonight, and then the final race at Texas. Maybe he is hoping, I was thinking maybe for a caution. I don't think so. Maybe you're just looking for that freshest rubber at the end of this race to grab whatever spots he can. This will shuffle Alt to the lead this time by 46 laps to go at Darlington, the penultimate race of the Contender Series.
Nicholas Shelton in, so that now cycles Dylan Alt back to the race lead. Jake Nichols is yet to come down too. That's worth noting. He is on the 2-stop strategy as well, with a little bit of damage to the right front of his Ford Mustang. So we're waiting for him to come down. He's the last of the drivers on the 2-stop strategy yet to make his pit stop. And as soon as I say something, he turns his car down to pit road, and that will mean Dylan Alt will assume the race lead. And then it's Witt and Brotherton and Bowden and Sherburne and Mercurio all trying to run him down.
Interesting to watch how these strategies are coming into play, because now that the 2-stop strategy drivers are in and done, they have everything that they need now to go run to the end. Not really waiting on anybody to come into the pit lane anymore. So as they run, it really becomes a game of waiting on when Briar LaPrade is going to cut his way back up through the field, as I believe he still becomes the leader, yes he does, of the drivers who are on a two-stop. I don't think this is going to go the way Dylan Alt was expecting it to, and the reason I say that is because in the first run, Briar LaPrade still caught up to Dylan Alt before Alt came down into the pit lane, and he was one lap down when he left the pit lane. He is on the lead lap and closing fast.
Is indeed. Current gap to the leader, 18 seconds. That's what Briar LaPrade has to make up in the last 40-some laps or so as we get a good look at Brian Mercurio's scheme. We haven't had the chance to talk about Mercurio much tonight, but he's having a good run in P7, currently working his way through on the one-stop strategy with a special, basically courtesy of his friends Big Evil Designs, the DEI throwback when they had the E-stripe down on the side of the race car, but you get a good look there. Good friend Dalen Barbar visuals atop the car. Noted NASCAR photographer who's commonly seen at the racetracks during National Touring Series race weekends. But a nice little touch here. Darlington, of course, the throwback track in real life as well. And pretty cool nod to great 2000s racing that Mercurio has on his car. The New Jersey native going to try and string together a good finish here this evening as we go on board now with Winston-Salem, North Carolina's Taylor Hurst just on the back end of the top 10 in 10th.
And we always talk about the lean for Hurst. What got me there was the intense blinking, and this is something just so ridiculous and minor that you never think about, that both sim drivers and real-world drivers actually have to deal with in the race car. It's so intense sometimes. I mean, looking at the blue light of a monitor doesn't help either. Your eyes get strained when you're running now 100 laps under green at such an intense racetrack that you literally forget to blink. And so your eyes get dried out. This is something that not just people in the sim deal with, or just even video game players at all, but real life drivers have to deal with this too. You forget to blink and your eyes get really dry. And I already talked about the mental capacity, the physical capacity that you have to have when you race at a track like Darlington or in the real life or the sim life. But that just caught me off guard real quick because I just realized, yeah, your eyes are gonna get strained and dry here tonight if you're not purposefully blinking. That sounds stupid, but it's true.
Giving your eyes a little bit of a pit stop of their own, I would think.
There you go.
The best analogy you can make, because you have a valid point. It definitely does take a lot of strain to focus like that for, especially if you're doing it in real life, somewhere between 3-4 hours here in the sim, usually an hour and a half to 2, but it's still an extended period of time that you have to concentrate, and it gives the eyes a chance just to rest a little bit as we progress through this race. Getting a good look now at some of the top drivers in the field. Liam Brotherton, Briar LaPrade, and Caden Honeycutt, along with Colin Bowden, running in 3rd through 6th. And you've got a mix of strategies here. Brotherton and Bowden on the one-stop, and LaPrade and Honeycutt on the two-stop.
And they are catching. I said it in my last hit. I'm going to say it again. They are closing fast. 13.5 seconds now. The gap between Alt and LaPrade, and they still have Blade Witten and Liam Brotherton to work through, but unless they are, in the words of Fernando Alonso, defending like a lion, or in Checo Perez's case, the Mexican Minister of Defense, I don't think they're going to put up too much of a fight. So LaPrade and Honeycutt are basically on a one-way ticket to the top right now. Still could see yellow flags, we still could see anything happen, but if we go green to the end in these last 37 laps, these guys up at the front better be watching for Briar LaPrade and Caden Honeycutt. LaPrade's already on the back bumper of Liam Brotherton. No contest for Briar LaPrade. Brotherton goes off to the side.
More on this from Justin Prince down on pit road. Justin.
Well, the strategy is getting very intriguing for some of the drivers right now inside the top 3. Will say this. Gotten the heads up from Garrett Mashburn for the pit box for Dylan Alt. He has been told he is good to the end. Blade Witt is currently still close on that mark, though. He's being told to continue to be conservative to make sure they make it. Compare that to the driver we just seen in Briar LaPrade. He's currently being told by Anthony Alfredo to keep doing what he's been doing and feel like they're going to be fine. They think the worst case scenario, they finish where they're running right now, 3rd. But there is the thought of if they're going to have enough time to catch up to the number 40. That's been a major discussion in that camp for the past few laps or so.
The number was about 17 seconds when he came off of pit road. It's now down to 10.7 seconds. Now, the gains are going to decrease as the run goes on. You see diminishing returns from fresher tires as you continue to cycle through green flag laps. So the final 10 seconds might not chip off as easily as the first 7 seconds did. Briar LaPrad's making a charge, as is Caden Honeycutt just behind him on the fresh rubber. No doubt about that. Here's Ashton Crowder running in the 9th spot. A good run for him this evening. The problem is that it just seems like it's going to come a little bit too late here. May well mathematically be completely out of a chance to make the Coke Series by the end of the night. We don't know how things are going to cycle through until we get point standings updated, but still a solid run for him. Meanwhile, Colin Keister continuing to make the charge. Remember, he missed his run down to pit road the first time he came down for stops around lap 45 or so, and to some degree, Josh Lee, I've had the question floating ahead in my mind, or floating around in my mind rather, that if Colin Keister had not missed his box, then what would he be doing and where would he be running at this point in the race?
Probably with LaPrade and Honeycutt, because they both have been cutting their way through the field, and Keister was one of those drivers that pitted with them, or a little bit later than them, I should say, but still closer to the same strategy. Keister is still catching up to them. He goes up into P12 now and is about to work his way past Taylor Hurst for P11 on the racetrack, and there goes Keister to the bottom into that quarter panel of Hurst, and you can see on fresher tires just how much better those cars are handling. Keister was able to carry so much more speed going into turn 3, and look at that, he's already put about a half-second gap on Taylor Hurst. He just passed him going into the last corner.
Colin Keister charging, and with plenty of speed. He's still one of the fastest drivers on track, if not the. Only, I think, Nicholas Shelton and Anthony Burroughs were in the ballpark of his lap times last time by. Just how much ground can he make up over the course of the final 30 or so laps. There's Brian Mercurio, who slides behind them as we now go on board with Dylan Alt, who's trying to hold off Blade Witt. It's a 7-second gap between those two cars, but they're on the same strategy, you'll notice. So maybe a little bit of a race between them. The bigger thing we need to worry about, though, is Briar LaPrade, who is now within half a second, now 0.4 of a second, and closing on Blade Witt for second.
And LaPrade continues to click on in some laps, get in some really good circuits, and continue to close in. Got a good look there in the in-car, and yeah, he's focused, seems pretty calm. He knows what his job is right now, to go out and catch up to Witt and Alt. And when I look at how important this race might be, you see some of these guys out front like Alt and LaPrade who have had great seasons so far. They're both top 10 in points, and they're looking at another great finish. But someone like Liam Brotherton in the top 5 right now, he put himself in position to make the next level because of his podium last week. That put him 1 point below the cut line. Now he's running again inside the top 5. The Elliott Sadler Esports driver was miraculously excited last week after a podium. A top 5 tonight, that might just get him above that cut line going into the final race next week. Other guys like Chris Shearburn, Alan Bowes, a couple of guys right on that cut line looking for a top 10 tonight with just 29 to go.
It'll be closed for Liam Brotherton no matter what happens here tonight. Meanwhile, for more from our race leaders on the one-stop strategy, let's go to Justin Prince. Justin.
Now, when it comes to some of those drivers still doing Alt, he still feels a little nervous compared to the vote of confidence from Garrett Mashburn on the gas. Mashburn's been trying to continue to forward the message. He feels comfortable with Alt trying to push a little bit. Alt, though, is saying he is not saving gas right now unless he is in the clutch in the midst of the corners. Compare that to what just happened. That pass going on with the number 7 machine. He has been considerably asking several times to try and be let loose. The team continues to tell him to think about the fuel numbers and think big picture right now. So some of the drivers, they want to go and are being told to be patient. Others, they want to be patient but are being told they can go now.
And how interesting, I think, a mental position that is, Devin Henry, because you've got a lot of these drivers in the one-stop strategy who sound like they're frustrated in some form or another, and the two-stop guys just have the ability to go. There's no concerns. It's just a matter of how hard can you drive and how fast can you drive it. I almost think that, in a sense, that might be a little bit more freeing.
Exactly, and really that's from because of you doing the strategy. That second stop, all that stopped you from was that 48 seconds on pit road and the speed up time and slow down time. Anybody who did not have a two-stop strategy in some way, shape, or form is either saving right now or was saving previously. There's no question, because you want to be assured that you can make it all the way through on that lone stop for fuel. A guy like Briar LaPrade, he doesn't need to slow down. He's got the fuel. He has more tire than the one-stop guys too, so he can just go at his heart's desire. But for a guy like Blade Witt, I feel for him, because he's only 1 point below the cut line. And you know what he sees right now? A podium or a win. But no, I have to slow down. I have to wait. This could be the momentum burst to get me to Texas, move me above the cut line, get me into the Coke Series. But the crew says no. Wait, slow down. And that for a race car driver of any kind, sim or real life, is frustrating.
We look at Colton Bowden here, currently in 8th, but he might give up the spot to Alan Bowes as Bowes goes underneath. And remember, Bowes was the last one to come down pit road, so he gave up time at the end of his green flag run, but he also has the freshest tires amongst the one-stop drivers, so it would then make sense that now, at this point in the race, he might be able to pass some of these drivers who are running on the one-stop strat. Next in line for him in that sense would be Liam Brotherton in 5th, but between Brotherton and Bowes sits Ashton Crowder and Colin Keister, and both of those drivers are on the two-stop strategy. So a little bit of work for Bowes to try and figure out over the course of these next 20-plus laps, but a good finish potentially in line for a driver who definitely will not mind it. Came into tonight officially 5 points clear of the cutoff line. Another driver who could use a good finish on board with now Nicholas Shelton, who was out by 1 point. And you think of what happened at Phoenix and how that race so easily could have been his, and how this could all be very different for Nicholas Shelton. It was still a solid finish for him at Phoenix, but to think that he definitely would be in the top 20 as it stands if he had the victory at Phoenix that we thought was coming for the vast majority of that race. I'm curious to see what Shelton does tonight and at Texas, and see whether or not the final few laps at Phoenix do factor into whether or not he makes it into the Coke Series next year or not.
And James, we just have problems in the back of the field. Ryan Doucette with a ton of damage to that number 77 machine. Sounds like contact with the 54 of Kyle Peddle. And there you can see Ryan Doucette down and into the pit lane with a ton of damage to that number 77 machine. Wondering what on earth happened here to Ryan Doucette. Doesn't bring out a yellow flag, but here we go. We can take a look at the replay, and it's contact. Two drivers come together, the 54 and the 77, and slams up and into the wall. Blake McCandless is involved in that one too, and unfortunately the worst end of the stick goes to Ryan Doucette in the 77. Let's go on board with Blake McCandless. He was an innocent bystander in this, came up and into the incident, absolutely nowhere to go.
I would say actually it's McCandless who gets the worst of this, because he got the most front end damage, and now he's down on pit road, stopped, getting a damage repair. And remember, he already has the last place finish from Auto Club, so this would be factored into his points if it stands like this. And Justin Prince, that's going to be a major problem for him going forward if that's how this pans out.
Keep in mind, when it comes to Blake McCandless, he was very close when it came to the cut line entering tonight. Needed a perfect race. 3 points back to be precise to the top 20. He's now significantly damaged, including no front clip as seen. Some frustration, keep in mind, from what just happened there, by the way. Doucette camp completely furious at what just happened. Some strong words. Let's just say some people are getting compared to goldfish right now.
Goldfish. I don't know if that to me almost sounds like a Vince Scullyism. I know we've heard him say fish sticks on a broadcast before, but I don't know if I've ever heard mad racers compare anyone to goldfish in my time. So we'll chalk that up as a first-time occasion here on this eNASCAR Contender iRacing Series broadcast. But more importantly, not that it is officially over for anyone of McCandless or Doucette or anyone who got caught up in that wreck, but realistically, if they finish towards the back like their score, Doucette 34th, McCandless 35th, it's going to be a win and then probably some help that they will most likely need in order to have a shot at the 2022 Coke Series when we get to Texas next week. That's just the reality of the situation, given how far Doucette was down in the point standings and given McCandless' precarious position entering tonight.
That's painful because of how low Blake McCandless was in that points. Then he had that absolute throw of a strategy, went to the craps table, threw out a wild strategy. It worked out for him on fuel, got himself where he needed to be, 8 points below the cut line, and well, now the lady in black takes it all away just out of sheer circumstance, and that's exactly what happens in all forms of racing. And now as these drivers continue to duke it out for position, you see here Dylan Alt still, and I think in a way, laying back, but that lead is now cut to 3.3 seconds. We'll see what happens here, because with 15 laps to go, for now, Briar LaPrade is only running about a tenth or two a second faster. That's not going to be enough. Actually, this time by, they almost ran identical lap times. LaPrade's got to find some extra nitro in there.
Again, diminishing returns on newer tires as a green flag run goes on. So yes, he's been able to claw back nearly 14 seconds of what was originally a 17-second gap, but these final 3 seconds are going to be the hardest as the tires wear out. It's just the way the things work on these cars. And it's something that he's going to have to be mindful of over these final 15 laps or so, and something that the rest of this field is going to be mindful of. It's the ultimate question of whether or not the one-stop or the two-stop strategy was the way to go. That being said, even if Briar LaPrade does not win this race, he will absolutely take this kind of finish and love his position entering Texas next week, because he will likely be very, very close to the point where he potentially could just go and run and be okay. Might be in with a shout of clinching a spot in the Coke Series next year once we take the green flag at Texas next week.
And LaPrade has definitely evened out on speed. Last time by, gained a little bit more time as Dylan Alt was having to navigate himself past Kyle Peddle in the 54, who he has since done. And now the gap is down to about 3.1 seconds, fluctuating in that range. We heard Briar LaPrade a little bit earlier on at the beginning of this run, struggling with a bit of understeer. Was basically told by Anthony Alfredo, who is on the box for him tonight, to burn off that right rear tire and get it a little bit looser so it turns a little bit better. Not sure if he's still dealing with that understeer, but you can see he's not gaining enough time to make any waves up at the front. I think you can see a little bit of disappointment with how the run is going so far from Briar LaPrade, as he's so close. Within 3 seconds, you might need a little bit more struggle from Dylan Alt, but right now, looking up the road from the 40, he doesn't have any lap drivers in front of him for the meantime, and I don't know if he's going to catch up to the lap drivers in front of him in 11 laps time.
We're on board here with Santiago Tires, hanging out in this race and not really worried about too much besides the battle in front of him. Currently in the 13th spot, trying to work his way up into 12th. He needs to go past Garrett Lowe and Chris Shearbird and company, then Colin Bowden before he can go race Anthony Burrows to try and go next spot for the top 10.
And for Tierrets, he came in tonight 21 points below the cut line. This isn't a bad finish inside that top 15, but man, when you got 10 to go and you see these 4 cars out in front of you, you think, I can pass Garrett Lowe, I can pass Chris Shearbird, I can pass Colin Bowden. A few drivers who themselves need a good finish tonight here at Darlington leading into Texas. This is the race where you know exactly what you need to do next week. It's either going to be, I need people in front of me to have issues. I didn't mean exactly like that, as we almost have these guys bouncing off the doors of one another. We all stay straight, though. I meant that figuratively, but you know if you're below the cut line, you're going to need help from other drivers' misfortune. If you're above the cut line, you know that you are in control of your own destiny. You want to have that control at Texas, where anything could happen in a final race to decide who will be a Pro Series driver next season.
Who is going to make the Coke Series and who might have a shot of making it tonight? Coming into this evening, drivers north of 41 points unofficially with Donovan Strauss, Colin Keister, Blake Reynolds, Parker Retzlaff, Caden Honeycutt, Dylan Alt, and Kyle Peddle. That gap maintains as we exit tonight unofficially. We should expect them in the Coke Series next year. So pressure will ramp up for everybody else who's on the edge of the cutoff line as we approach 8 laps to go here at Darlington, because we're going to lose some of those 20 spots. Some of them are going to get locked up here tonight. And we'll see who exactly finds themselves in Coke Series competition by the checkered flag here in just a few moments. We will, and we'll certainly have a few that unofficially have clinched a spot. Now, keeping our eyes on that gap between Briar LaPrade and Dylan Alt, it still has come down, but it's only 2.4 seconds now, 2.3. So LaPrade certainly gaining on Dylan Alt, but there's just not quite enough time and life left in those tires, I think, unless Alt makes some sort of mistake on the racetrack, Josh.
Oh my, and a lap car just hit the wall in front of him. He's going to pull out of the way. That was Justin Bolton, who just slammed the outside wall going through turns 3 and 4. Alt's not affected by it, but like you mentioned, James, 2.3 seconds on that gap. LaPrade is either going to need a big mistake from Dylan Alt to lose that 40 some time, or to go a little bit more topical, a late race caution that is going to bunch this field back up for an overtime finish. Here's what happened to Justin Bolton into turns 3 and 4. He just completely went up the racetrack. Nothing that 14 could have done. He just went straight to the wall like a magnet and ended up pulling off the racetrack.
Moments that will take your breath away if you're Dylan Alt. Meanwhile, Kyle Peddle just smacked the wall behind him, so everybody around that 40 car getting into the fence in 3 and 4. And Dylan at this point is just hoping that we don't get a yellow flag. That would be worst case scenario for him now that we're within 5 laps to go at Darlington. Can he hang on and pick up his second win in as many races, or can Briar LaPrade run down this 2.4 second gap amongst these final few laps? It's held steady over the last handful of circuits here at Darlington, so we might not see it. We may, who knows? We just have to wait and see how this plays out. But still a good finish in the works if this goes green and no mistakes are made.
As we go on board with Briar LaPrade, you can see him closing in further on the 40 of Dylan Alt, but it's staying stagnant, 2.3 seconds, and now he's got Bolton and Peddle in between himself and Dylan Alt. I think that strategy was great in the beginning of this run for Briar LaPrade, but now that the tires have pretty much equaled out, Dylan Alt has done an amazing job. He did an amazing job in the first run. He's doing an amazing job in the second run of saving his tires. Props to Dylan Alt. It has been a great run for him tonight. Started on the pole and is looking at a win tonight, but how about the tire conservation that the 40 has done tonight? Some amazing work as Colin Keister has just got by Caden Honeycutt for P3. Honeycutt doesn't look like he's exactly done as they'll go diving back into turns 3 and 4. We could see more as it sounds like we have an incident on the racetrack with Seth DeMerchant, and it looks like he might have hit the wall coming off of turn number 4. Still no yellow flag with 2 laps to go, but the Logitech G-Altus Esports teammates got into each other as the 99 got put into the wall by Malik Ray, and then Seth DeMerchant got in there for a little bit of damage as well, James, but Dylan Alt's getting ready to come to the white flag.
Michael Cozy Jr. is hanging on. Can Dylan Alt get to the white flag here and make this race official? Next flag we get will end the race as Dylan Alt crosses the line. 1 lap to go from Darlington to the eNASCAR Contender iRacing Series. Devin Henry.
And if he has the gas, what a time to go back-to-back for Dylan Alt. Might just solidify him a spot in next year's Coke Series. Boy, this one's got to feel good.
It'll be big. He came into tonight 46 points ahead of the line unofficially. This win should, in all likelihood, earn him a berth into the Coke Series for next year. We'll have to wait until it is signed, sealed, and delivered. But what we do know is that Dylan Alt comes across the line and is a 2-time winner in the eNASCAR Contender iRacing Series for 2021, joining Donovan Strauss as our second multiple race winner of the series. Dylan Alt victorious for Lowline Racing here at Darlington Raceway.
I mentioned it. What tire conservation from that 40, and you can see the 35 of Briar LaPrade, a second place for Briar. He gives a congratulatory bump to Dylan Alt, but what a run for Alt. This was the run that is going to solidify himself as a Coca-Cola iRacing Series driver. An amazing run, goes to show exactly why he is in the position he is in the eNASCAR Contender iRacing Series.
Dylan Alt going to burn it down on the front straightaway or park it? No, burn it. Burn it. Proper celebration here because that's 1 foot into the Coke Series for next year, almost certainly, Josh Lee. And that will take the pressure off significantly when we head to Texas next week.
Going to have no pressure for Dylan Alt, so he really doesn't even need to show up, to be blunt with you, but he probably will just to, run the race and make sure that he is in the eNASCAR Coca-Cola iRacing Series. These drivers do not want to leave anything up to chance, but you can see Dylan Alt using up that fuel tank in the couple of laps he had left in it, and now can get a little bit of contact with Liam Brotherton as he brings it back into the pit lane.
Dylan Alt coming down there and stopping and pulling over. Time to take a look at the full race rundown and tell you where your favorite driver finished. Alt victorious by 2.1 seconds in the end over Briar LaPrade. Colin Keister finishes third. We'll talk to those three in just a few moments. Caden Nuttycut, Ashton Crowder completing the top five. Blade Witt was sixth this evening. Seventh went to Nicholas Shelton. Alan Bowes with a good run. He finishes eighth. Liam Brotherton with his second consecutive top 10 finishes ninth. And Anthony Burrows completed the top 10 in the running order. Josh Lee.
11th goes to Garrett Lowe, Colin Bowden in P12, Chris Shearburn P13, Santiago Tires P14, Taylor Hurst rounds out the top 15 with Jordy Lopez Jr., Brian Mercurio, Blake Reynolds, Derek Justice, and an uncharacteristic 20th place from Donovan Strauss. That's his worst finish of the season.
Rough day for Cody Bias. Qualified in fourth. Has to settle for 21st position. Malik Ray finishing in 22nd. Seth the Merchant had his issues late. Made something out of nothing. Started 33rd. Brings it home 23rd. Jake Nichols in P24. Derek Bordeaux in 25th. 26th goes to Brandon McKissick. 27th, Michael Cozy Jr. Kyle Peddle takes it home in P29. Justin Bolton rounds out the top, Justin Bolton 29th. Femi Olot rounds out the top 30.
Parker Retzlaff was 31st this evening. 32nd was Daniel Everhart. Casey Tucker finished in 33rd. Blake McCandless was 34th. Ryan Doucette 35th. And Zach Nichols completed our 36-car field for the sixth and penultimate race in the 2021 eNASCAR Contender iRacing Series from Darlington Raceway. Let's now bring in our race winner, Dylan Alt from Sacramento, California, at a Low Line Racing Stables joins us. And Dylan, the call here to go on one stop, just take us through the decision-making process there. I would assume primarily pre-race and how you're able to execute that over the course of 140 laps here tonight.
I was really hoping that it was going to be a one-stop race because I feel like I had a better chance of winning the race if it was a field strategy race. But yeah, my crew chiefs, I know Seth Ryder and Brendan Kohler and Garrett Mashburn, they were all just calculating it a couple of days before the race, and it was actually closer than I thought. Briar was actually, I didn't think he was going to be 2 seconds back at the end of this race, but I just can't believe it works, or it worked. It's unbelievable. It's crazy to have a back-to-back finish just off of field strategy races.
Fuel strategy races, 2 wins in a row, so much momentum going into Texas. Any thoughts on trying to make it 3 in a row to round this out next week?
Texas, I don't really. I know I was gonna have a good finish for Road to Pro, the Road to Pro qualifying series, but yeah, I got wrecked in that race. But hopefully, I can because I have so much momentum going into Texas that I'll have a better finish. But going into Darlington, I didn't expect to get a win. I just wanted to get a good finish so I could just get locked in for the Coke Series. But this is crazy. I don't know what to say. Yeah, I'd just like to thank Lowline Racing, Elliott Sadler Esports, Certainty, Pay to Win Setups, everybody that helped me get here. I don't know what to say.
That was the final point I was going to bring up, is that unofficially, by our math, and obviously we have to wait for certification from Tyler Hudson and the folks at iRacing to make it official, but by our math, you should be in the Coke Series next year, no matter what happens at Texas Motor Speedway. Even to be this close, what's it mean to you to make it to the top level of stock car sim racing?
It's just, I don't know what to say. It took a while to get here, I guess I would say. A lot of laps, just in one night. I think I was like last Wednesday, I took 500 laps here just to practice. But yeah, I want to make Lowline and Elliott Sadler Esports, all of us, to make it into the Coke Series next year. So that's what I'm going to try to do at Texas. Just try to help my teammates as much as possible. And yeah.
A little bit more work to be done, but it's been an incredible second half of the season for you, Dylan Alt. Big thanks for chatting with us this evening, and congratulations on back-to-back victories.
Thank you.
Dylan Alt, we believe, by our math, going to be Coke Series racing next year. Another driver who we, by our math, have into the Coke Series pending certification from iRacing and Tyler Hudson and all the folks. Briar LaPrade, right on the edge of the top level of stock car sim racing in 2022. He's joined now by our Josh Lee.
Oh, Briar, it was a great run for you tonight. You went for the two-stop strategy. It looked like you had a bit of a rocket ship at the beginning of that last run, and then time sort of fell off, and you kind of kept a stagnant 2.5-second gap. What more did you need in that last run?
Just tire and hoping Dylan ran out, man. I got lucky enough. There's some kind of incident there with Ryan Doucette having a problem in front of Dylan, and that cost him a good amount of time, so that definitely helped out. I don't think I would have been as close as I would have, but without that happening. So, but it is what it is. Just needed some more tire and just a little bit more time, I guess. Another lap or two, but yeah, that really stings, just needing that extra lap or two. If it came down to me fuel saving, I probably wouldn't have finished second. That's one of my worst things, trying to do that on iRacing. So, yeah, I just went after it. That's the best thing I could have done, and we did that and finished second. Just a little too close for me to sit there and not be like, yeah, let's enjoy second. But we're right there at the win, man. So that was a little disappointing, but I'm proud of that performance. Honestly, that was awesome. Shout out to Logan Sheets and Anthony Alfredo. A little bit of a different box for the rest of the series here because we're getting ready for the Coke Series. So that's nice. Just getting some warm-ups going. And this is my last race on this rig that I got going on here. Shout out to SimSeats for hooking me up. Gonna probably go set that up here in a little bit and get ready for ERA tomorrow at Auto Club.
And coming into tonight, what was the method behind that two-stop strategy? Because it definitely was the story of the two-stop and the one-stop. What deterred you away from the one-stop, and what really brought you over to try that two-stop strategy? Because even though it was a second place, you were still within 2.2 seconds of the race leader, so clearly it worked for you.
Yeah, I'm not the greatest at fuel saving, and we qualified up there. I think we qualified 5th, I believe. So at that point, I was just like, all right, we might as well go after it. We're up here. It's kind of hard to pass here, so figured I'd just hold on to the track position I got and just get after it. Like I said, that was the best thing for me to do. And yeah, we almost made it work, but just not close enough.
So with the prep now coming in for the eNASCAR Coca-Cola iRacing Series in 2022, where's that confidence level at going into your maiden season? Because we have seen a lot of rookie drivers come in and set the series on fire. We've seen other rookie drivers come in and have to go right back into the Contender Series. So how much preparation are you putting in, and where's the confidence level at right now for you and the Lockdown Racing team?
I think the confidence level's definitely up there for sure. I don't want to sound like I have a big ego or something, but after running through this Contender Series, I still got one more race left, but after this whole series so far, I feel pretty confident. I do fully expect myself to get beat up on in the Coke Series and all that, but as Steven Wilson said, I'm streaming twitch.tv/PatriotBriar. Of course, shout out to all of them for watching, all my viewers. But yeah, according to him, we're, new car, everyone's on the same page, so we'll see how that is. But yeah, I do fully expect myself to get beat up on and just trying to figure it out my rookie season. But you never know. We could maybe pull off something wonderful, I guess. I don't know. But yeah, confidence level is definitely sky high. Just also want to give a shout out to Cameron Ledford. It's his birthday today, so happy birthday to the boss man, the guy who's supported me for a long time to get to this point. Ledford Billiard Supply there, ledfordbilliardsupply.com. Check them out. SimSeats, Maconi Setup Shop, JDR Graphics, Flat Out Racing Network. Go check them out. But yeah, just can't thank everyone else enough at Lockdown Racing. Taylor Hurst and Donovan Strauss. We've been working great together these past couple races. So hopefully we can do that in the Coke Series, because Donnie, he's something else. He's on another level. But we'll figure it out and see how next year goes.
We look forward to seeing you then next year in the Coke Series. Briar, thank you so much for joining us here tonight, and congratulations on your second place run.
Appreciate it.
Great to hear from Briar LaPrade, James. Great friend of all of us here at Podium Esports, and amazing to see him get on the podium this season.
That's quite the birthday present for Cameron Ledford, who has been supporting Briar LaPrade for a long, long time, outside even of Contender Series competition, but just in general on the sim. And with Briar, everything he does on his own Twitch channel, a Coke Series birth after all this time, that's a pretty big present, I think, for him. Also, a pretty big present for the next man we'll talk to, who we also unofficially have as Coke Series Racing for 2022. Back of the big time is Colin Keister, and he is with Devin Henry.
All right, Colin, so I got my pen out. I got my notebook out. You missed pit road, and you got on the podium. How in the world did you do that? You were fast so much today. You missed pit road. You get the pit stop done, and you still get to talk to us up here in the booth. I need some tips here or something.
Yeah, first it started off with that bad qualifying effort again, and then I didn't know that two-stop strategy was going to be that much better than the one stop, and then I knew I was fast. I was gaining on the leaders, and then I went down pit road and just completely blew it, and had to come back in again. I thought my race was over again, but we had a lot of speed, and and everybody being on that strategy helped out a lot too, and I was able to recover and finish third.
This is such a mentally demanding track. And when something like that happens, I can't imagine the frustration after having that frustrating qualifying run, running so well, and then missing the pit stall. So what do you have to do mentally to get yourself back into this race and come out with another incredible race?
I just got to stay focused and keep hitting my line and don't thunderfoot it and keep the tires on it. That's pretty much it.
It looks like you are officially Coke Series driving. It looks like you're also the points leader right now. The highest average finish, you've averaged a finish inside the top 5. What kind of momentum does a stretch like this take when you look at going, okay, it looks like I'm going Coke Racing next?
I'm hoping to keep the momentum rolling, get another good finish next week, and keep it rolling into the Coke Series. I'm excited to be back into the series and hope to run for a championship next year.
Colin Keister's been an incredible season, but this might be the most incredible performance. A third-place finish tonight for the North Force Racing driver. Thank you, Colin, for your time, man.
Yes, thank you, guys.
Bit of an anomaly his run in the Contender Series last year was, now that we look at it more, because he was so strong 2 years ago when he raced into the Coke Series for the first time, and he's been so strong tonight racing into the Coke Series now unofficially for a second time. And as we look at the point standings unofficially, and again, let us underscore that the final roster will be certified by Tyler Hudson and the folks at iRacing after the conclusion of next week's race in Texas. So these are not official, but by our math, drivers locking themselves into the Coke Series tonight were Colin Keister, Dylan Alt, Donovan Strauss, Caden Honeycutt, Blake Reynolds, and Briar LaPrade. So those 6, we believe, are already going into the Coke Series in 2022, no matter what happens next week, the season finale at Texas Motor Speedway, which you can see December 21st if you need a date for your calendars, 9 p.m. Eastern broadcast time start on iRacing's Twitch, YouTube, and Facebook channels. But Josh Lee, 14 spots amongst maybe about 20 or so drivers coming into next week, and we've seen Texas get nutty in the past. We saw, in particular, 2 seasons ago in the Coke Series, the playoff race just went completely bonkers in the final 15-20 laps. And the same sort of pressure is going to be on the line for at least half the field. You've got a lot of drivers that still have a shot at potentially being in the Coke Series next year, and only one race to get it done.
We've got a lot of drivers who are looking at a locked-in spot into the Coke Series. We have a lot of drivers who are looking at a locked-in spot out of the Coke Series. And then we have this gray area in the middle where there still are drivers that can fall below the cut line and drivers that can go above the cut line. It's going to be a different race for every driver. There's some drivers that are going to want to defend as much as they possibly can, and there are some drivers that are going to be on offense trying to do that Hail Mary pass to get themselves into the Coke Series. We're going to be watching at least 10 different storylines from Texas, so that is one broadcast you do not want to miss, and we'll find out what the provisional 20 names will be that'll join the 20 names that kept their spot in the eNASCAR Coca-Cola iRacing Series.
Last big official race of the year right before Christmas, Devin Hendry, and once we finish it up, we're done. We're finishing, or we're finished. We're dusted. We will have 20 names up for submission to Tyler Hudson next Tuesday night. Should be a lot of fun.
Man, and what a Christmas present it would be to know that you are going to be one of the 40 drivers racing for a championship at the highest level of eNASCAR stock car racing in the world. So when you look at Texas, if you're not one of those guys who we named off that we think are eligible to just completely clinch after tonight, the bet is made. You know what you need to do. You know if you need luck, or you know if you are in control of your own destiny. And to have that feeling and know, I control what happens next, some of those drivers, is the best thing that you can have motivation-wise moving into this final race.
Our drivers will in turn be desperate because it will be out of their hands. They might need a little bit of help. You're going to have varying degrees of desperation next Tuesday night. And how it pans out, we'll just have to wait, make our way down to Texas, see what happens. The only way to settle this shootout for the final spots for 2022 eNASCAR Coca-Cola iRacing Series. A big thanks to everybody at iRacing that helps to make this possible. Tyler Hudson, the series administrator, and the production team, Drew Adamson, Sean Ambrose, Cisco Scaramuzza, and Corey Vervinch. For our team at Podium Esports, Gary Sexton, John Theodore, for Dougie Beard, our camera builder, all the folks at Video.Ninja helping to bring us the cams, and our team on the broadcast this evening. Our producer, Ryan Bauer, our man down on pit road, Justin Prince, and my partners in the booth, Josh Lee and Devin Henry. I am James Pine, the voice of Podium Esports. Thank you so much for watching our coverage of the eNASCAR Contender iRacing Series for the virtual Darlington Raceway, and we will see you next Tuesday night for the virtual Texas Motor Speedway for the 2021 Series finale. We'll find out which 20 drivers advance to the Coke Series next week.